Welcome to this week's edition of Madisyn with the News. Today we're going to be talking about the growing homelessness population in the United States. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, it is estimated there are around 582,000 Americans experiencing homelessness last year. Homelessness increased about 2,000 people from the year 2020. Now let's break this down by state. More than half of the homeless population resided in 4 states. California is the #1 state for homelessness. New York is the state that holds the second highest homeless population. The 3rd state with the highest homeless population is Florida, and the last state with the highest homeless population is Washington. In 2022, California held 30% of the homeless population, New York held 10% of the homeless population, Florida held 5% of the homeless population, and Washington held 4% of the homeless population. It has always been well known that California has had a large homeless population, but just how bad is it? According to LendingTree.com, the total state population of California is just over 39 million. Of that 39 million, more than 171,000 people in California are homeless. And only 25.98% of homeless population live in homeless shelters. So where does that leave the rest of the homeless population? The rest of the homeless population live in what California calls safe sleep villages. According to the LA Times, Sleep Safe Villages, created by the nonprofit organization Urban Alchemy, are essentially a village of tents on the streets of LA that are available for the homeless to live in. In an interview with the LA Times, Kirkpatrick Tyler, the nonprofit chief of government and community affairs of Urban Alchemy, says, "Our philosophy is that we should have a multitude of options for our unhoused residents. What we found in the early iterations of Safe Sleep is that some people preferred tents because it gave them a sense of ownership. The tents are also a place where the homeless can be kept safe and not victimized by drug dealers or others who prey on unhoused populations. The homeless not only have a safe place to live, but they are also provided with 24/7 management and security to ensure their safety." While this program does help unhoused individuals, it is costing the city a fortune to keep running. According to Fox News LA, the program costs about $2,600 per month per person. But even with these Sleep Safe villages in place, there are still thousands of people experiencing homelessness throughout the state of California. The state has spent a record of over $17 billion trying to combat homelessness, but it is still not working. Now the question becomes, what else can California do to combat homelessness? Well, first let's start off by saying that theoretically, with all of the money the state has spent on trying to combat homelessness, they could have paid the rent for every unhoused person in California over the last 4 years. But according to CNN, even if they were to do that, there is not enough affordable housing units to go around. This is why California has had Project Homekey in place since 2020. Project Homekey was put in place to quickly house thousands of people who are experiencing homelessness. According to gov.ca.gov, on November 7th, California Governor Gavin Newsom announced it is awarding $156.4 million in Homekey grants. These grants will finance 12 new projects across California, which will create 556 new affordable homes for the homeless. With this new project in place, Project Homekey has now funded 14,040 homes for homeless individuals. While California continues to battle homelessness, New York has a different approach when it comes to the homeless. New York has a population of 19.6 million and a homeless population of more than 74,000. But how is New York combating the battle of homelessness differently than the state of California? For one, according to the New York Times, New York will not consider Sleep Safe villages because the city has a legal right to shelter. According to ABC News, New York is one of the only cities that has a legal right to shelter. And the legal right to shelter was put in place in 1981 and requires the city to provide temporary housing for every homeless person. No other big city in America has a requirement to provide shelter for anyone who may ask for it. The right to shelter provides the homeless with a guaranteed shelter, meaning a shelter with 3 feet between beds and access to showers and basic toiletries. While New York's right to shelter law was put in place to help the homeless population, it may be doing more harm than good. Despite the city having 110 certified homeless shelters, the city's homeless shelter population contains over 100,000 people, which is a record high for the city. New York has attempted to weaken the law of the right to shelter. However, according to the New York Times, a class action lawsuit that was filed in the late 70s argues that the right to shelter originally existed under the New York State Constitution. To settle the lawsuit, this is when it was agreed upon that every homeless person who applies for shelter will receive it. The agreement also laid out for standards of care of the homeless, including bed size and staff to resident ratios. According to the New York Times, over the summer, Mayor of New York, Eric Adams' administration asked the courts to relieve the state from some obligations under the right to shelter agreement. The court proceeding is still in progress. While New York is doing what they can to help the homeless population, it is impossible for New York to house more than 74,000 homeless individuals with limited space for more shelters to open. New York will continue to open as many emergency shelters as possible to keep people from sleeping on the sidewalk, especially with the cold temperatures making its way to the city. While California and New York will continue to make their efforts to combat homelessness, Florida has a different approach when it comes to helping the homeless. Florida has nearly 26,000 homeless people, and it continues to grow as many people became homeless after Hurricane Ian. A lot of the homeless are unable to find housing because of the high costs. In March of this year, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed the Live Local Act, which is the largest investment for housing the state of Florida has ever seen. The bill invests $711 million to expand the availability in housing, assist families with down payments, and focuses support for military communities. But even with this bill and act, according to apartmentlist.com, the median price of a rent in Florida is about $1,400 for a one-bedroom and about $1,700 for a two-bedroom. And in September, Ron DeSantis went a step further and prohibited rent control, meaning that any landlord can raise their rent as high as they want to. With these laws in place, how could the homeless in Florida ever afford to get back up on their feet? Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is a candidate for the 2024 presidential election, and in a political ad he made, he went to the streets of San Francisco and criticized the streets that the homeless live on, instead of fixing the homeless issues he has in his own state. Let's take a look at the video.
We came in here and we saw people defecating on the street. We saw people using heroin. We saw people smoking crack cocaine. And you look around, the city is not vibrant anymore. It's really collapsed because of leftist policies. I've seen so many businesses boarded up. I've seen so much riffraff just running around. And it just shows you these policies matter.
While DeSantis continues to taunt California for their growing homeless population, Florida still holds the third highest homeless population in the U.S. Locals of Florida have started taking things into their own hands by volunteering at homeless shelters that are at risk of closing due to a lack of volunteers. The homeless shelters in Florida provided a place for the homeless to eat 3 meals a day, or the homeless are provided with a box of groceries for the week. They are also provided with a place to shower and are provided with toiletries. While Florida has some homeless shelters, there are still not enough resources in the state for the large homeless population. America's homeless population is growing each year, and while the states do as much as they can to lower the homeless population by getting the homeless into permanent shelters and getting them the resources they need, the homeless epidemic may never end because there will never be enough affordable housing in America. And if there ever is, there will never be enough affordable homes for all Americans to live in. And that's it for this week's edition of Madisyn with the News. I will see you back here next time.